Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. On this interesting episode we're going to do here. So I'm sitting in my office importing the last episode. Getting on the editing bay, getting the effect to render overnight. Only takes about an hour, but I hate dealing with that at the same time. And so we just finished the conversation, then we were texting after that, and I said, give me an episode idea. And she goes, "How not to be dumb." And I thought, well, that's pretty hilarious. Obviously, if you're listening to me as a longtime person, I obviously know you're a brilliant person, and not as an accolade to me, but just that you would have even the macabre interest in listening to a person pontificate to this level. It means you can see something else going on. But let's think about this for a split second, because maybe there's some valuable exchange that we can do in just talking about something that whoever says that, Well, I was going to college the other day. Really? What class you taking? Well, I'm taking How Not to Be Dumb 101. Oh, really? I'm in the 202 class. Yeah, I think you're right. What teacher do you have? Oh, yeah. My cousin just graduated on How Not to Be Dumb. Now he's going to How to Be a Millionaire school. I cracked the tip of this thing trying to cut it through the wrapper. Damn. Anyway. Now, I've done several episodes on left brain, right brain, intelligence versus smarts, and the difference being memorizing and repeating being the perceived sort of faux way that we initially seem smart to others. And then it's its application, it's its connections, its correlation, cross-references, one thing canceling out another. Oh, then the theory advances. A theory advances. But how do we stay smart? How do we stay intelligent? Because there's two different things in my book. I think the simple answer that we could all probably gravitate to would be keep learning. Keep learning constantly. You don't have to change subjects, which is what I do. But I think that's fun too. Variety is good, right? But I'll give you an example. So I'm gathering information for another NASA video, and I've been doing research on nuclear thermal rocketry, because that's a new thing. It's not new, Jesus, it's 1944 and up. But it's starting to gain some steam. And so I was watching some heavier mathematics videos that have the equations of thrust, trying to calculate fuel use versus maximum velocity versus the acceleration. And it was really interesting because without doing this show and being challenged by friends to really explore certain areas, I would have watched this video today and went, oh, yeah, that's great. Yeah. And I could have seemed smartish, right? Because I just memorized an equation that then we can, get the variables and put it in there. Well, how big is the rocket? How much fuel do you have? What kind of fuel do you have? Also their stuff, right? Every single thing that I just recently saw in the last hour was very interesting because it was missing some key elements like, okay, so you built a rocket, whoop-de-doo. You got a fuel and you have an ignition mechanism, which based on the fuel, you're going to have a molecule size. You're going to have an aperture of which you can move, which are just two measurements of resistance. But what they never had in this video, really nerdy video, was any mention of the outside atmosphere. It didn't take into account launching off the ground, then going into a pure atmospheric lift mechanism, and then the gradient density of the atmosphere, plus potentially large anomalies in the atmosphere, an air pocket of sorts. Can you imagine? You're flying and you don't have a dense pocket of oxygen. It's literally a bubble of damn near nothing. Now your rocket it's flying like a bullet through that zone, and it will penetrate and go to the next side of that little pocket. But There's so much launching in the morning in the cold, launching in the afternoon with a lot of heat thermals going up. The atmosphere's density is just about as uniform as the exhale I have off of the cigar. None of the equations were there. They did mildly account for the lighter atmosphere on Mars. But then again, the landing procedures on Mars up to this point have been any kind of contraption that could just basically keep an object from crashing into the surface. All complete bullshit. Decent theories. No one's on Mars. No rovers on Mars. Really sorry. Really sorry. If you think that insults the theme of this episode, then this episode is probably something you need to watch, you know. But I'm looking at this video and I'm thinking, man, if I hadn't spent the last, at least 6 years with you guys studying ethereal sciences, and then the previous 35 plus years studying physics and cosmology and a bunch of other stuff, I would have just swallowed this. But it was being able to look at this whole thing from a bunch of different perspectives that made the algorithm make sense up to a level. It is drastically incomplete for what the variables are. And I cut this guy a little bit of slack because he's really just trying to talk about thrust that a rocket can achieve. However, his end product was how fast this rocket is going to be able to travel in space. And of course, I think most scientists most unpaid shills come to the conclusion that if you could leave the Earth's orbit from the gravity well of Earth, and apologies to people who don't think we're on a round planet, believe me, I got you, man. We got to use their theories to address their ideas, right? But if you're in space, let's just say, oh, that's the way it is. You're not going to be able to correct the velocity. You're not going to be able to accelerate and deaccelerate in pure space. There's nothing to push off of. So it's interesting. All the equations that account for what you get to see in your eye when you watch a rocket launch are equations that make sense based on the materials and interactions with the atmosphere and the ground. Once you get in, not the vacuum of space, but the hugely radioactive area of space, which compared to any atmosphere would be very, very vacuous, but it's not a vacuum. You're pushing off nothing, man. And, again, for those of you who are just like, oh, man, you're the absolute biggest idiot on the planet. All right, so let's take the Star Trek science here. And you're in space, okay? And according to rocket engines working in damn near a vacuum of space, okay, it's very radioactive. But again, molecule size and density are very sparse. I shouldn't say size, but density. But you should be able to push on your chest in space, and you will have, according to these misused Newtonian laws, an equal and opposite reaction that you can basically push on your chest and you can travel anywhere in the universe you want. Space doesn't care that you pushed on your chest. You're simply maneuvering the molecules in your body. There is no relative wave of energy that's going to interact with nothing and give you a velocity or a rate of acceleration. However fast you got to space is how fast you're going. And whatever director and vector XYZ you're going, that's where you're going. So if you could somehow figure out a way to get yourself stopped in space, you'd start seeing stuff go by, fairly fast if you could live a trillion years, because everything would be moving around according to their theories, right? Which again, probably most of it's made up to feel intelligent, right? So how would this apply? You're obviously not an idiot. So why listen to this episode? Well, one, it's sort of for two groups, maybe even three groups. The average public that is seemingly struggling with any level of discernible intelligence. Two, you might be a parent or a grandparent or a guardian of a child that needs to have their mind stimulated. And three, there's us. There's us that needs to continue the exploration of this realm that we're in. And then we have to focus on an area, even if it's just for a split second in an abstract model or a very disciplined scientific theory. You focus, and then you go get a sample of data, and then you look at it using a discipline of some sort. Your discipline could be, I'm not going to put any algorithms on this at all. I'm just going to see what it looks like and see what occurs to me. I'm holding this weird alien amoeba in my hand, and it seems to lack my hand, so I'm just going to look at it, right? Or it could be, I have trapped helium inside a balloon, and we're going to do some experiments with how it burns, how it moves, how it makes my voice sound. Then we'll go on to the next unknown, because we are explorers. And being intelligent is nothing more than a mental extension of your natural desire to explore. The one thing that is godlike in man is your nature to explore. And this idea that you just come from the sludge that I guess had some lightning bolts hit it, and then all of a sudden we crawl out and, we get single cell, multi-cell, and then all of a sudden we're crawling up on the beach. I guess God could have done it that way, whatever. But we have this sentient nature to explore. Now, at the same time, I've said in previous episodes that we're pattern-based creatures. I have a whole episode on just look up pattern on deepthoughtsradio.com. As possums make weird noises over there. And the thing is, there's an elation algorithm to find something new, provided that you have reached a level of exiting your troglodyte phase of being a cave dweller to the point everything unique is terrifying. Being ignorant of something, not stupid, but being ignorant of something could draw a lot of fear. What was that noise? Zabada, It's hard to say whether or not man, after being created, was fearful of everything and then learned to be calm with things, or were we calm with things, naive, and grew fearful as we explored this world and watched someone get eaten up. It would seem that if there's any form of biological evolution of any kind, even if that's God's trick or alien drop-off trick or whatever, that we would systemically be pretty scared, just like every animal that you interact with. Why can't you just go up and pet a bird? Because, man, they're looking at you. Why can't you go up and pet a deer, just any deer? Because they think you're a predator. I mean, just look what Godzilla did to Bambi. Seriously. But let's think about it. We are complete unique beings with unique geographical origins, parents, guardians, friends, environments, the decades that we're born, everything, the cultures that we're born inside of. All of that will set your brain up to have preferences of what is entertaining and what is not entertaining, what is good and what is bad. How many times have you met someone who had a traumatic childhood and then a bunch of stuff that is actually not bad in the world is earmarked as bad because in their childhood it was bad. And then later on they kind of find out, oh man, yeah, I finally realized how to compartmentalize my past and just push it into the incinerator and get rid of it, all the bad stuff. And then all that came out the other side of the incinerator were the good things that were in there that I couldn't see before, but until I burned away all my bad intentions or bad feelings and classifications of things. Well, imagine that an area of learning has been demonized, because that happens all the time. I don't know too many NASA people that probably haven't seen most of the Star Trek episodes on TV or Star Trek movies. They watch sci-fi, but they mostly like science fiction kind of stuff, right? Star Trek's kind of in between. There's a lot of science fiction elements where they have scientists literally on staff to talk about, what should you say? We got to have a new medical procedure. So there's a whole staff of doctors coming up with new medicines, using real medicines, using theories that the writers work with. So they're congruent with their love. They're kind of a nerd in the real world doing real practical things, and they're assisting in the creation of a fictional construct, right? But now what if you're a person that goes, because this has been almost uniform in my life, if a person goes, yeah, you nerds in that Star Trek stuff, I just don't like it, it's whatever. I'm dealing with someone, okay, who probably has a hemisphere of love for like bars and what baseball game ended up one way or the other. That's fine. It's just we're different, that's all. We might go into that and have no interest in the statistics or history of a player. We don't care about a rookie card for somebody. And then there's the hybrids, which I assume a lot of you are, if you dig this kind of variety show, you like it all. You like it all. And even the stuff that you don't like, think about a conspiracy person who's trying to figure out who's negative and who's positive. You're trying to find out where the threats are in life and where the oases are in life. And so you're accustomed to taking in both potentially positive information and potentially bad information. If you're not born into the conspiracy realm, which basically means truth hidden. If you're not born into that, then you're fed propaganda up to a point, and then something breaks you open and you start to, whoa, wait a minute. You know, the reality that I was told is not real. Let me get this. Okay, what happened to this? And man, it takes you about a decade of aggressive research, and then you sort of checking everything out against your own knowledge to figure out, well, what is your opinion of the moon missions, Kennedy, Lincoln, whatever, all those events, those negative events that were orchestrated. You have to make up your own mind. If a new piece of evidence drops, then 20 years later, like it did this year, new evidence dropped 20 years later, whether it's real or not, you know, I think a lot of it is, but I saw footage that would have been really, really handy 15 years ago, but it wasn't available 15 years or 16 years ago. These things mold your mind, and it really molds the container. If you think about it in a different metaphor, the container that you use for, say, a bowl of cereal is smaller than the container you might use to mix up a salad for your family, or the skillet that you're going to cook your eggs and bacon in. They're all different sizes and shapes to accommodate the task that's at hand. The inside of your theoretical brain, this little temporary chamber you've created between your body and your soul, which is your mind, it is as if your life has a blacksmith. And the blacksmith has been watching you like a Greek god, and they pounding out, you know, areas where you accepted things. They created more volume to this ever molding thing that you call your head. And then if you start being closed-minded, they start pounding it in to get rid of volume. Your container becomes smaller until you end up like one of my parental units. You have this crushed golf ball size thing that can only fit a pea in there, right? Which is basically the autonomic instructions to run your body. You know, when I did the episode on enlightenment, prior to doing that, I didn't know the beautiful definition that is simply to see more. It's perfect. But in the area of intelligence and expanding your mind, again, you have to open that wing up. And you've all done this a million times, right? Before you learned how to ride a bike, you had no conception of riding a bike. And so when you started to feel it balance, and then you felt that freedom, there is a weird feeling in your chest. It's almost angelic, godlike feeling of, oh my God, this configuration of a human on a bicycle, as Steve Jobs used to always say, is one of the most useful, or I should say, efficient uses of power for locomotion in the entire world's existence, beating out animals that can run 60 miles an hour. Well, that's huge. It opened the chamber. And then you get out of your banana seat bike. For those of us born in the 70s, you get your BMX bike. Then you migrate up to a little motorcycle and a big motorcycle. You got your cruiser motorcycles. You got your crotch rockets. Then you get your car. Maybe you start out with a moped, but you got your grandma's car. Then you buy your own car. Then you buy a luxury car. You get your two-seaters when you're young. Then you have a family. You buy a SUV, maybe even a van. Then the kids get old enough. You sell the van off, get yourself a truck. You're expanding. But it was all based on your first experience that opened you up to learn how to drive. But now, when we learn something new, do we really sit down and premeditate everything that I'm saying in the slightest? Not usually. But what if you did? What if you're like, okay, I want to know how to do that 3D stuff that guy does on that Deep Thoughts radio. And so you get your Blender 3D at blender.org. It's free. It'll always be free. You download it, and before you double click it, and before you start doing YouTube videos, which will teach you everything you need to know, you do this mental exercise. You simply say, okay, I'm going to allocate the space in my head. I don't know how to do the things that I want to do, but I've seen the videos that do the things that this product can do, and it's extensive. They've done Pixar movies without that brand, but Pixar is gradually moving over to using Blender as per the CTO. In, I think, August of 2019. It takes a long time to migrate all their tools, but okay. So let's say you saw a Pixar movie in this product. They've made them. And you're like, okay, that was all done in this product. I mean, there might be outside products helping with color correction and editing and all that kind of stuff, but overall, it was all done in Blender. So I need to open up this universe that's empty that I'm going to start putting stuff in. And man, is it exciting. Man, is it exciting. And what's kind of fascinating about it is, I don't know a lot of examples for the females, but, you know, you guys get into everything too. But I could just definitely say there's this weird difference between being an adult and onboarding something brand new. Either your job's forcing you to do it, or like I just said, you decide to teach yourself something. And then there's the other one where, because of your father, your uncle, your brother, whatever, your buddy, they organically did things in front of you and you learned them. Learn how to do it. Fixing an engine is a big one. Fixing a car. You know, there's bodywork experts. There's engine experts. There's electronic people do stereo work. And you just take it in, and it's slow, and there's no pressure, and no one's expecting you to even assist in the process. You're just sitting there taking it in. It's not a challenging thing. Because we're going to have to talk about challenge here in a second. And then, as you get older, people say, well, how on earth did you learn how to do this? You're an amazing race car mechanic. And you think back, it's like, well, you know, since I was 3, since I can remember anything, my father was always tinkering with his little jalopy race car. And then it just kept, you know, I guess by the time I was 18, I got a job on a racing team, and right? And it just moves up like that. So that when you know, so the reason why I mentioned that is that once you get rid of, or I shouldn't say get rid of, once you realize what you know that you gained organically from birth through these weird sort of phantom rite of passages with individuals, and you want to onboard something new. I have seen people get absolutely fearful, get full of anxiety for whatever reason. They couldn't leverage their talent and accomplishments from one thing into another realm to say, hey, I'm just a person who figures out things. I just am. Yeah. And you know what? I hope it's not too easy, because I like a challenge. Now, definitely see IKEA has done us all a favor in this realm. Why do I have screws left over? So there's a weird anomaly that I know that everyone's at least seen, if not personally experienced, which is, there's a couple ways to view this. There's the old saying, no one likes a smart aleck, right? And it has to do with, you have an average mean of intelligence within a certain community, and for whatever reason, there is envy for intelligence because people understand that intelligence was a commodity back in the day. Someone told me the story, and I've repeated it several times in different shows over the years. But when someone told me, you know, the reason why Masons got extremely powerful, when, you know, really, if you just ask what's a Mason, you know, they're into like different things today. But back in the day, let's say they go back 5,000 years. They're laying bricks, right? You always see the Mason. It's funny. They actually have that in some of their artwork, but then they'll claim the pyramids. They'll claim everything, right? People who build things, basically. And you're like, well, how does that get you power? I mean, isn't gold getting you power? Isn't being a big tough guy and roughing people up give you the power? And what this person taught me was, nah, if you can put shelter over a person's head, and you can make a one-story building out of brick that's a lot stronger than clay, you become really popular really fast. People will give you their daughters, man, way back in the day. But if you could build a water well, because you could use a divining rod to get the plasma energy flow out of the Earth's weaker crust, that's what a divining rod does. It completely makes utter sense. Then you drill, you dig, you lay the bricks in, and you drop the bucket down for the first day of water, fresh water, right out of the guts of the earth. And now you can build a community around that because you have one of the two elements that sustains life, and it's the most important one, right? You can go without food for a long time, but I think, 12 days without water, you're on death's doorstep. I think maybe even 10 days. You're a bag of water. You need to put more water in yourself, right? So in those realms, you would become extremely powerful the more intelligent that you were than you were in respect to someone else in the village. But eventually the village gets completely set up. It's just an engine. You just get food in the morning. You take care of the temperature and all that kind of stuff. You make sure you're warm in the winter and cool off in the summer, and people procreate, do all they do. No more geniuses necessary anymore. And then a threat comes in, you know, from some neighboring village. First you start with spears, maybe even rocks. Then you make spears. Then you put rocks on spears. Then you do arrows. Then you rebalance arrows. You light arrows on fire. I mean, it's just, you know, it just keeps going up and up intelligence. And that starts creating this imperative for man to continue to innovate. So if you're innovating where the village needs you to innovate, they are your number one fan. But the second you start kind of, in their mind, showing off, man has this weird thing. You have too many. As the guy said in Zeitgeist, when he goes to this island, he said, I just brought beads inside this bag because I was told that that's what they use for currency. So he went and bought a ton of beads and brought it there, and he puts it in his little hut, and then he goes down for food, and he comes back up to his hut, and the elders are in there dividing up his beads. And he's like, you know, invasion of privacy, theft. And he's like, what are you guys doing? And he said the tribal leader said to him, you have too many. We have to evenly distribute everything. Thus, we don't have envy and someone wants to kill you. And plus, it fortifies the whole village, the better economy. And that's when he got it. Now, again, most first world people worried about whether or not they have a notification on their phone, whether or not their TV is bigger than someone else, whether they have the same kind of off-road equipment that someone else living next to them has. We don't get that. We don't get what primitives get. So I'm giving you that foundation because intelligence is something that people can hate you for. Big time. Big time. It also really, really, really comes down to how you present yourself and your intelligence such that people don't get threatened by it, right? One thing I love about my appearance is everybody thinks I'm a dipshit. I love it, man. I fucking love it, man. No one bothers me, and I don't sit there and exhibition stuff until someone wants to try to give me a drink through my arm, and then maybe I might lean out a little bit of stuff. But just having people discover what you do is so much more interesting than having to tell them. And I do apologize for the sort of narcissistic thread that goes through some of these episodes where I have to share my personal experiences to make points and hopefully inspire from time to time. But you know the people that go in there, you know, usually it's a young person. If someone keeps this young behavior in their older age, I mean, they're really missing the boat, man. But, you know, walking in, well, I've done this and I've done this. And, you know, it's like, let us figure that out. Or throw it in a little bit more kind of incidentally. Well, you know, I wrote this book, okay? And it's like, it's just a book, you know, and it's like, blah, blah, and all of a sudden the book is like some super amazing subject matter, and the person's a fantastic writer. It's always best to let people tell you that you're smart if that's something that you need in your life, you know. Hopefully your own opinion of yourself is all you need, right? But it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of confirmation here and there. Hopefully you can help people and that kind of thing. But I really want to illustrate, you know, the envy is one of the mechanisms behind this. And the other one is probably best described as just being an asshole. I mean, it's just that simple. And I'm sure we're all guilty of making those mistakes. So you know, there have been times in history, and I think I've recently mentioned this in the last couple months, but, you know, I had friends of mine tell me that, and I think this happens in all cultures, but I've heard this twice from friends of mine who are not white, and they said that they were the first person in the family to go get a college education. And I think in both cases, the mothers were the champions of that situation. The fathers weren't. And to their surprise, the father was quiet as they were leaving to go to college. And when they came back with a degree, And they sat down and they're proud of themselves, and they thinking, oh gosh, I've upgraded the family. This is going to be a great thing. The father said something to the effect of, oh, now you think you're all that, and just goes into a full-on attack on them, basically saying, you think you're better than me now, don't you? What is that revealing in that person? It's just a dynamic that you got to keep in mind as you become intelligent, because there's becoming intelligent and then there's acting intelligent. I've grown up in the nerd world my whole life because of video games and computers and stuff. And I think overwhelmingly the majority of these folks, probably even 90%, had their act together the whole time. But every once in a while you get one of those zingers and you're like, oh yeah, they make people like this. But the only thing the old men were trying to tell their sons is, I am really envious of you. I lived a harder life. I lived in a time when those opportunities, no matter how hard I pushed it all together, I just couldn't make it work. And I wanted to go to college too. And now you went. And the other thing is that they're actually exhibitioning a fairly intelligent thing. But they're spinning it in their brain the wrong way, which is to say, I know that you know that you're smarter than me. And I don't like that. Because I'm so pissed off. And they're also saying, look, I know that I could have done as well as you did. I just couldn't bring it together. And it's sort of a gut-wrenching situation for everybody in the room. Hopefully those moments are long gone, but let's just say the parent knows about that situation verbatim, and then they don't reveal that they have this feeling, and then it turns into a bunch of other things. It's like you push something down, it pops out somewhere else. It could be like you're being attacked passively, aggressively in some other area. We had a kid, just to put a fine point on this whole thing, and give you a real-world situation that I ran into. I'm running my department of electronic arts, and we're doing this gigantic build. I mean, it is just like madhouse in this place, right? And someone brought me this kid and said, you have to employ this guy. And he was like this, really clean-cut guy, had his act together, and he was confident, man. He was super duper confident in everything that he did, and apparently he was just like this whiz-bang coder, but he wasn't using a platform that we were going to be using. He was an NT guy, and we were all going to be Unix, right? And so he comes in, and it's a weird situation as a director, someone coming in and giving you an employee and say, you got to hire this guy and give him some space in the hallway and all this other stuff, and he's going to be telling you what to do and all this other stuff. And I'm like, we have a gigantic operation. And by the way, this guy is talking about things that are exclusively in the other department across the building there. I had half the skyscraper and they had the other half, right? I talked to this kid, and he was just a wonderful person. I mean, he was just bright and like a bright personality, like he just chippery, my buddies, Alfred used to say. And I didn't talk to the kid, I don't think, ever again. I saw him working in the hallway. He didn't touch anything that was related to what we were doing. And I think that for whatever reason, some VP thought we were going to use NT because he didn't know a goddamn thing about computers. And so, man, I heard this is great. Like, dude, we're building a multi-$100 million platform, and this is not going to scale, just so you know, right? And then one day I came to work and he was gone. Must have been a couple months. But I had to digest him knowing that he meant well. But I could see that with other managers, I mean, it could have been a philosophy fight, like, come on, man, that's crap. It's crap for what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. I just let him do his thing. I didn't cut him down. I thought maybe there's something I don't even know about. Maybe there's some wing of a product we're making it that makes complete sense for like a particular game. NT might have worked, would have cost a ton of money. Just vanished. Strange, right? But how not to be dumb? That's where we are, right? I think one thing that we don't admit to ourselves is that there's not a single person that can hear my voice, theoretically even hear my voice, that doesn't know something really, really well. Something. And it might, as long as they're able to earn an income, it's like 18 and over, where you basically get kicked out of the house and you got to go get some money. There's something you can do to earn cash, right? Once you find that little kernel, we typically build those kernels up until we're ready to transition to something that's more aligned with our insides, right? So like I worked at I worked at a video rental place, I worked at a movie theater, and then Walmart before I came to California. And so all I did was I took the nugget of working at the movie theater at 13 and built that up. And I got to the whole point I could open the place, sell the tickets, stock the food, sell the food, call the studios and report in the ticket sales. I mean, the whole thing. Then I transitioned into video rental stuff. And then you have to learn all your movies, figure out your pitch, all this other kind of stuff. My point is this. We have these kernels of what we know. And we tend to only learn what we need to know to get the job done. At least that's what I do. That's funny. One of our listeners comes to visit me physically, and he's like this audio expert. And so we're talking about how to compress this audio that I'm recording in the least amount of steps using the software that I use to record as opposed to renting Adobe's Audition. I totally got rid of all Adobe products. I don't use Photoshop anymore. I don't use Illustrator anymore. I'm all Affinity. Paid one time $25 per app when they were running a half price special. But my buddy, he knows the genetics of most microphones that exist on planet Earth. I mean, the circuitry. He understands how to make everything sound amazing. He understands audio software. Amazing, man. So he starts where we were talking, and he's perfectly keeping things within the envelope of what I understand, right? And then he starts going off, and it's just, he's a genius about this stuff. And so he's telling me he knows this mic really, really well. He's talking about various mix boxes, the software. And we were able to use my other computer had the same software. We start using stuff right away. The point is this. If you were sort of bored with what you know, go back to things. This is an option, right? You can go off and learn something brand new, and that's what I like to do. But sometimes I have to kick my own ass to remember, wait a minute, I love physics. I love this. And hey, I was taught a bunch of propaganda physics when I was young. Bad theories of gravity and all that other kind of stuff. And so what'll happen is, as I learned, the ethereal gravity theories of push instead of pull, I was satisfied. Oh my gosh, it's an epiphany. It's amazing. It's going to take me a couple of years to rethink everything that I learned in physics, because a lot of it still works mathematically, but it must be backwards and how it works. Like, was it cathode versus anode electricity? Electricity moves in a cathode manner, but there's still a bunch of anode theory out there, which is based on electricity going the wrong way. But both of them work. Isn't that crazy? I mean, for those of you who aren't electrical engineers, it's as absolutely insane as you're a waterfall expert. Well, how does a waterfall work? Water's up high and it falls off a cliff. Maybe bang some rocks on the way down. But water always moves down a waterfall. And so imagine you've got a bunch of geological science about waterfalls. And then you take that, copy it, paste it into your document, and rewrite all the laws as if water goes back up the waterfall. And it works. That science still works. That's how crazy it is between cathode proper electricity movement and anode electricity movement. It's just crazy. I mean, in the end, with an AC unit, moving back and forth is part of it. But it's just fascinating. So the reason why I mention that is that you can go back to things that you know and study them more. Blow the dust off things. The other one is just to simply say, there's more to know, but it also could branch off into something completely different that you didn't know. If you're a musician, oh my God, you know that there's a billion things you can learn about everything. There's other software out there. There's the software that you're using. And just like everybody uses Excel, they only use 1% of the product's capabilities. Same thing is probably true with most of your software that you're using. There's a whole bunch more that you could do to this thing. Make your presentations look better. Maybe just take an artistic class as opposed to just a perhaps a graphic layout class. But now let's talk about multidimensional intelligence. I didn't know it when I first mentioned this book that I own called Gödel, Escher, Bach. Gödel was a poet, Bach was a musician, and Escher was a mathematician who just happened to be a cool artist as well. But he used mathematics to figure out how to draw things. And what the book is trying to get you to do is to do this. Between poetry, music, and mathematics, if you discipline your mind into those three areas, and again, if you think mathematics is boring, and unfortunately Gödel, Escher, Bach isn't in print right now, but you can get used copies of it, and probably a digital copy somewhere on Kindle or something. But just download, go look up Escher, MC Escher, and look at the stuff that he drew. And tell me that that isn't the most amazing way to learn mathematics you've ever seen in your life. Listen to Bach. Bach had 20 kids, man. The dude was in the late 1600s, right? 100 years before Mozart. The way that he wrote music was to teach you how to play music. And so learning him is to learn the full functional spectrum of how to play a piano or harpsichord. It also teaches you a full spectrum up until that era of the emotional spectrum of how we listen to music, what emotions we were willing to put into music, which was me. It was more Top Fuel Drag Race algorithms of emotion, whereas Mozart gave us love in music. I mean, you could feel the soul move in his music, right? I would say every spectrum that love comes in between two people is captured in a Mozart piece at some point. And then we get Beethoven after that, and we're back to like Duplo hits on the piano, but it's gothic and, huge and bigger than life. He was sort of an homage to the past, and probably because of his hearing defect. I have not seen the movie of that, so I don't know what they're asserting in the movie. But if you had a hearing issue, you would most likely pound it out just so you can hear it, So when you bring those hemispheres together, especially poetry too, the elaborate understanding of words, you rhyme for a really long time as you get started, and then you realize it ain't about rhyming at all. I mean, if you can be really clever and unique with it, yeah, it's great. If you can surprise a person with the rhyming second word, then that's unique, but it's not necessary. Poetry is about using words to give a group of people in the same room or in rooms around the world who simply recall your language, either the day you wrote it or 200, 300, 400 years after you, 1,000 years after you wrote it. The truth in your message is so clear and so refined that it's like a tuning fork for your soul. And when you read good poetry, you know that whoever read it and really understood it, which it should be accessible to, that's the other beauty of poetry, you want to make sure that the words that you chose were so simple for the masses to understand that a person with an 80 IQ feels the exact same way as someone with 180 IQ. At least about the specific message. The 180 guy is going to get further dimensions and probably how amazing the writer was. But I think even the most simple mind can appreciate that. And that's beautiful. And just remember, at least in America, IQs were a lot higher in the 1800s than they are now, which has nothing to do about what you understand and can repeat. But now, the multidimensional thing is to massage areas of your mind that are distinct, right? The logical path of mathematics, the pure right brain emotional beauty of poetry, which is empathetically understanding another human being's mind, and perhaps one could brag and bring it all the way to the level of understanding all human condition through the truth of symbols and words. And then music, which merges both things together. The mathematical nature of understanding octaves and the 12 notes that are on a piano, but using that mechanism to orchestrate poetry. It's beautiful. One of the things they focus on in the book is a Mobius strip. And a bunch of you know what that is, but just in case you don't know, it's when you take a loop of paper. Let's say you take a maybe 2-inch thick piece of construction paper and you tape it to itself, right? So it's a loop, like a belt. But instead, before you attach those two ends, you take it and rotate it 180 degrees and then tape it to it. So now, as you travel around this loop with a pen, for instance, you will end up traveling on both sides of the belt. It's beautiful. Escher drew these ants crawling on it, and now we have the quantum blocking puck with the superconductors. That tiny change made your mind think differently. Escher's the one that's super famous with the impossible staircases in this kind of stucco mansion, drawing optical illusions that you've seen where you can't tell if the thing's going in or out because your brain's constantly switching the orientation in your head because the information is actually wrong as it applies to real life. But it's making your mind think. What's strange about an optical illusion is that you constantly change your mind. It's almost like you have I'm trying to think how to best describe this. You know, you've seen those decodes, right? Where someone will write a letter with a bunch of letters that are all in the wrong place. And then if you have the decode, the little sci-fi ring from the 50s television shows, you know, it'll teach you that A is really M, and, you know, they've rotated the alphabet around. Without the decode ring, you can't read the message. When you see an optical illusion, all of your circuits that are trying to process the reality of what you're staring at, because it is drawn in a particular way that doesn't look like a scribble. So your brain's like, that's a building, but wait a minute, the staircase, wait a minute, that's going back and forth, the Mobius strip. Now, how do I get on both sides of the thing? How did that even happen, right? Your brain can't shut off. And that's why just staring at some of those optical illusions and allowing it to confuse your mind is almost like physical therapy for your brain. Because your brain's going, oh, I wait, I don't get it. I get it. Oh, no, wait, I don't get it. Oh, well, it's coming the other way. Oh, no, wait, it's like that is keeping your brain ticking. It's a little bit like the, was a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Nutrimatic Dispenser, trying to figure out why Arthur Dent liked boiled teas in water, which was basically tea. And he couldn't figure it out because it's like, that's an awful idea to boil leaves in water. And so it's going to take a long time. And once it started thinking about it, the ship's computer locked up in the middle of a space battle. That's sort of your brain. But it's good for you. It's blazing new trails inside your mind that once you stop looking at the optical illusion, and then you start looking at a formula that you couldn't decipher. Oh, at least that makes sense. I know this formula is something that's being used in the world for something, and I just have to figure it out. So I went to a place where my mind was blown. Is it a candlestick or is it two faces, you know? There's a little museum in Los Angeles in Culver City. It's called the Jurassic Museum. If you're ever in Los Angeles, find it. Although, you might want to wait till the coof goes away and the insanity of this whole thing, which maybe never. We'll see if anyone nuts up. But you go inside, and the first floor is a bunch of like 1920s, man, it's probably late 1800s to about 1930 things, like the first 3D doodads was 1850, you know, when you have the stereo images and you look through the doodad, that's 1850, man. The anaglyph glasses came literally just crossing over the 20th century mark, and believe it or not, polarized lenses were theorized in the mid-50s. So in my brain, it was all about 30 years off. And I did a research project for a presentation I had to do. But you get in there on the first floor, and they got just fun stuff, like this dude carved sculptures inside the eye of a needle. And the needles are all inside these compartments away from you so you can't hurt them. But you put your eyes up and you have a magnifying lens perfectly focused on that thing. And you can see Goofy from Disney the Disney franchise in there, and the dude's perfect. He fits inside the eye of a needle. It's incredible. So this first floor is amazing. The little bookstore in the front is pretty cute too. Tiny little place, teeny tiny place. But now here's the thing. They have a second floor. I went to the second floor, expecting more of the stuff that's on the first floor. I immediately get into this cognitive science area of the museum. Cognitive science is what we're talking about. The perception of concepts that then can be studied and matured and evolved. But the first thing I personally remember was a sort of an optical illusion board up against the wall. As soon as you come around the corner, it's like, I think it was like over a desk or something. And it was so disorienting for my mind to go from this 1930 to 1890 kind of thing down, or 1850 to be honest. And then pop up, and I'm now all of a sudden in like probably the most advanced 1980s thing to present. All about teaching the brain how to think. And because no one told me, oh, that's what this floor is all about, it took me a while to figure out, what am I doing? Like, what am I looking at here, right? But that was that interesting area of the museum that's designed to sort of pull your mind to the forefront. You have this thing, this entity between your body and your soul. Now, let me ask you this. How many of you who have studied something all by yourself because you wanted to, and it was a really nice experience? Doesn't matter if you finished the research or not. Whenever you did it, you really enjoyed it. And then maybe for work or college, the weirdest one I think is work. I had to get OSHA certified in 2018 for a project building a gigantic LED theater screen. And because the construction site I was on was OSHA, and so you had to do it. And so I had to do this course. It was a long-ass course. I think it took me 2 days. It was easy. You're just taking tests and learning things. And believe me, OSHA is almost something that little kids should have to learn in their teens, because it does teach you a lot of awareness, your PPE stuff, and just don't be an idiot. And man, I thought wearing a hard hat on this project was the dumbest idea, theoretically. And then I probably bumped my head 3 times really hard with that hat on. I was like, oh my God, if I didn't have this hat on, I might have a gash on the top of my head. But learning OSHA I was enjoying it up to a level, but when it became this mandated thing that I had to do, and I had to get it done right away because I had to get my certificate sent to me so I could, get this thing I could print out so I could prove to the construction site that I was certified. It wasn't that fun. So that's another element of learning that we don't always take into account, which is, how am I learning right now? How am I learning? I got 3 Blender courses I'm taking right now. Absolutely love everything except repetitive stuff, which I can always fast forward. But like when you buy a class, you'll have someone else's take on the basics of a product. And it's easy to skip it all and go to the good part. But these geniuses will have, like, I've already found probably 3 different nuggets of how to use Blender that I never heard of before from any of the other tutorials, other classes that I took. And I think that's amazing. And so I labor through hours and hours and hours of the basics, in probably every out of 5 videos, 4 have nothing new for me whatsoever. But the 1 out of 5 has a, 60-second segment in it that's something new that's going to shave hours off my life of using that product. Or make my renders look so much more realistic that it's worth it. And the clients are like, I don't know why, but your stuff looks better. I haven't had that comment yet. It's a comment I'm going for. The thing is I think most of you, if not every single one of you, are at a stage in your life where if you're going to learn anything new, you're the boss, man. You're the boss. And so you can dictate whatever you want to learn. Now, I promised sort of at the beginning that we talk about kids as well. Teaching other people, which can be one of the most rewarding things you will ever do in your lifetime. But there's different flavors of doing this. I learned with my kid, she's born with this competitive gene. She doesn't like being told what to do. It's just this thing. Maybe culture gave it to her. I don't know. Maybe it just runs in my family. Because it does. It does run in the family. I'm not competitive at all. I just want to have fun. That's it. So if I were to take, paint or paintbrushes, pens, all this other stuff, and take it to my daughter and say, when she was little, and go, hey, here, you can play with this. This is cool. This is fun. This is how this works. And I got about a 50-50 chance that's going to take. But here's the fun part. I found out the trick. I use it in front of her for my stuff. I do a project right in front of her that's fun, and then she would look over and see me doing it, and I'd ignore her. I didn't bring it to her. And I just leave everything out, the paper, the pens, and all of a sudden next morning she's drawing like crazy. So if you're like, hey, my kid might want to play a guitar, then buy one and just learn how to play it yourself. Maybe even if you don't know how to play it at all, you don't even want to learn how to play it. She's like, I just want to have instruments around my kids. Play it crappy in front of them and put it down. And don't make it off limits. Don't buy like $1,000 guitar, right? Just buy some $250, $300 acoustic at first. And just see if your kid doesn't pick that thing up. You will have hungry kids from time to time, and they end up being the smartest kids on planet Earth. When your kid isn't hungry, oh my gosh, it's just like a constant battle to make them happy with their life, Now, let's talk about, for a brief second, dealing with people that apparently have no interest in learning things, but sort of burden your circle of influence with their ignorance. Potentially stupidity, but let's just keep it for ignorance, meaning they just don't know better. Now, obviously, I could say right off the bat, try to change your life so that you're not around them. That wouldn't bother you. And, if that's possible, maybe you can do that. That's up to you. But I have to say, even that's a dumb piece of advice, or a pretty obvious piece of advice. Sometimes we need to be told those simple things. And we're like, oh yeah, I don't have to hang out with those dudes. But now some of it is, endearing ignorance. When a kid doesn't know something, we don't freak out. But when adults do, we're like, really, dude? You don't know this? I mean, really? Okay. I'm sure that my friend, her angle is, people being scared of the coof, putting panties on their face, putting drinks in their bodies, even though you can catch the coof, even if you take the drink. Like, what is the point of everything? Do these panties on my face really work? Because then I'll just keep that on if it gets really tough, and we're all good, right? Because, hey, that's how we're going to flatten the curve, right? So, unfortunately, the world is massively packed. First world nations only. Third world, we expect that kind of stuff. But first world nations that are supposed to be the big, sophisticated group of people, you can just walk outside and go, oh, there's one. There's one that doesn't know what the hell's going on in the world. Good intentioned people, perhaps. Probably most of them. Ignorance is ignorance, man. But here's the other interesting thing. This works between intelligent people all the time. Sitting with your buddy. You're doing something interesting to them. And they let you know. They lean over, oh, man, what are you working on? Oh, that's cool, man, that's cool. And you just kind of go, well, it's actually pretty easy to do. It looks really difficult, but it takes a little while to learn. But, this thing's free and blah, 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 blah. And you start describing it to them, and you give them the ability to jump on board if they're interested. If they're not interested, totally cool. And an analogy to that would be if you are, let's just say you're an amazing musician, or one, and you're sitting with them and they're phenomenal they're famous for what they do. That if you lean over and say, hey man, I just want to know I love your singing, I love your guitar playing, drumming, whatever it is. They're like, thanks, man. Because they've learned how to do it if they're famous. But they don't immediately say that you have to join them at their level for you to have a great conversation. And so if you're one of them, because it doesn't have to be rock and roll, man. Could be you're an engineer, you're an attorney, you're a doctor, you're a nurse, whatever it is, right? You don't expect people to jump onto your career. It's when you're in a career circle and you're sharing the burdens of the job and the responsibility to keep a department running or a company running or whatever it is, and someone constantly kind of screws up. And you're like, man, if they just study a little bit more, get, practice every once in a while, they'd have a better outcome. It happens in sports all the time. The basketball players practice the free throws. The baseball players practice batting. And yet they still will get struck out instantaneously. It happens. So some of our perspectives can be off. People are just having bad days, bad little segments in their life. Could be that, they actually know a lot more than they are currently exhibiting. And then you just do have your person that's sort of at their glass ceiling. They're not going to get any smarter. And so it depends on what position you're in. My advice to my employees has always been, don't cover for anyone else outside of a single anomaly, right? Someone's got an emergency in their life. Yeah, go ahead and cover for them. It's cool. But if someone's habitually abusing the system by not fulfilling their obligations to the system, I always tell the employees, just let them fail. Let them fail. Because one, that'll let me know I got a problem with that employee. If you cover for that employee, then I won't know, and I can't do anything. And eventually you're going to blame me for bringing you a stupid employee. I've had employees lie on their resumes and find out they don't even know how to code. Well, they know some other language that's, useless at this point. In some cases, I've done pairing with them. I've sat them right next to me, and I said, okay, here's the deal. And I don't even say to them, I know you lied on your resume. I said, let's just build this class together. And one of my employees really super duper lied, but she was the mother of 2 kids and with an unemployed husband at the time. So I saw the desperation in her, but I also saw the dedication in her eyes. And I brought her into the office and I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to teach you this stuff, but I never said you lied. I know you don't know what you're talking about. And she also had a brother that was a big-time engineer, but he was like 500 miles away. And so she worked with him. He may have even done some of her work. I worked with her, but after about a year, she was doing her own stuff and she was understanding it. And to this day, right now, she's an engineer. Totally cool. The other one is if you're a supervisor and you have a bad employee, sometimes, they're just way over their head. And so you really do have to sit down and be honest with them and say, okay, I think you're a bright person. I think you're a nice person. But regardless, if you can't do this job, I can't keep you. And so if your company's doing well and you got some cash in the bank, you can float them for a little while. If you're cash strapped, you need to cut them as quickly as possible so you can get that money allocated to someone who can do the job. Obviously, we're dealing with a situation now in the world where people are affecting each other with their ignorance in a big, big way. And I mean, you all know what I'm talking about, right? Hopefully in, 2 or 3 years, people will be like, what are you talking about? I don't know. But right now, we've got numbskulls all over the planet behaving badly because they're numbskulls. They don't understand the full dimension of what they're doing. And here's the weird thing, that if they had a different education, both spiritually and technically, they wouldn't think twice about doing what they just did. They would never do it because they would see the moral sin in what they're doing, if there is one. They did harm, big time harm. I live in a community that really lives. The families get together, barbecue all the time, have little parties together. They teach their kids, hey, don't run around downtown and get yourself in trouble. Use the garage. Here's the music. I'll make a bunch of food for you. Even if they drink underage, at least they're doing it at home and everybody acts really respectful. So when I see that and I go hang out with my friends like that, I know that there's probably not a lot of education going on in the home. They simply learned what they needed to learn to live a wonderful life and be really happy with their life. Very rewarding. And for those of us that are constantly grinding the stone and just ever hungry for new information, and we got scars all over our bodies, right? From being broke one day, rich the next day, broke the next day, and that cycle just keeps going because you're willing to save up your money, learn something new, leave your old career behind. I mean, sometimes the economy forces you to do that. You survive, but you're more in a sputtering engine versus one is sitting there cruising like a Harley. So there are sacrifices that if you're going to make this a habitual thing, you have to allocate your time properly so you don't injure what you got going that's going well, you know? So it's a balancing act. The whole thing comes down to a balancing act. But I guarantee you, if you get really smart in some analytical, logistical area of life in segment A, area A, you now all of a sudden become qualified like a video game to get the tech enhancements and a bunch of different stuff because you've raised your average IQ up to do all these other things. And if you know, a lot of people come to me and go, do you know any good IQ tests and that kind of thing? There's a bunch of faux ones out there online that will make you feel like you have this massive intelligence by giving you just a couple questions, which is not really how it works. But there's a pretty remotely free way. It's about $15, I think. Prices might vary, but there is the Mensa Society that you can join if you're really smart, and there's Prometheus over that. Don't worry about being super smart. Don't worry about getting a membership to these things. They do offer a bunch of levels to have fun with their materials, but if you want an IQ test, it's a sobering thing, and it can be really encouraging. You could technically know very little in the world. You could be a housewife in the Midwest. You live a great life, but you're like, am I smart? I don't know if I'm smart. Go online. It's MENSA. Get their little IQ test. Have it sent to your house. It's just this paper test. And, you know, you can cheat if you want, and you might as well just burn it. But it will show you the difference between your IQ and your intelligence. Or excuse me, I should say your smarts, right? I always reserve intelligence for your IQ. Your intelligence quota, right? But the test is like a series of numbers, and you have to figure out what the next 2 or 3, 4 numbers are. And, you know, first couple are pretty simple, and they want you to time yourself. You can get 2 tests and time yourself with one and not time yourself with the other. Just have fun with it, right? But the best part about these tests are they'll show you like maybe 8 to 10 images, little cartoon images of transportation vehicles is one of my head. And it would say something like, which one doesn't belong here? And that's all they tell you. And you're going, wait a minute, you know, it's like, you should tell me what parameter excludes one of these things. And they're like, no, you should be able to look at these pictures and find out which one is excluded. And I think one of them was there's a bunch of the vehicle ones in the last one I took. And one of them was you had to determine that all the vehicles that are supposed to stay all had a commonality that they had rubber touching the road. They had tires. The other one was wind power. And, you know, there's just all kinds of ones with windows. I mean, it's a fun little thing to get your mind thinking algorithmically in a really fun way. It's really cool. I'm sure they make a little bit of money. Imagine selling you 4 pieces of paper for $15 plus shipping or whatever. They're making money on it. So they don't really care if you join. Don't worry about joining. But that's the more questions that they ask you, the more accurate that your IQ test is. And what's funny about it is this is where I started to learn the difference between a Jeopardy contestant and someone who's really smart, really intelligent. The Jeopardy contestant is memorizing and repeating a bunch of stuff, a bunch of useless facts, but the world will pat them on the back. Oh my God, you won all that stuff from Jeopardy. You're the most brilliant dude. Ba, ba, ba. And then it comes time to solve an equation. And suddenly knowing how long the Nile is in kilometers doesn't help anymore. But the more you build up that library of claims, okay, in science, especially in history, anthropology and chemistry, or I should say even like pharmaceuticals or what have you. When you start to learn what they have claimed, and then you go learn the science of it, and then you try to experiment within that science and try to make it all make sense, that's when you have this massive epiphany of, oh my gosh, you guys have been lying the entire time. Well, look how partial that information is, but look how certain the scientists behave when they present it to the public. Making it up. Making it up. The idea that people told you that the Big Bang happened. Go see my episode on stupid science. It's unbelievable the magnitude of stuff that you are told is true to settle your little soul, right, treating you like you're some moron when they don't know. But we've allowed them to get accolades for made-up stuff. We've allowed them to get massive paychecks and status in the world for lies. It's time we put push the little reset button on that one. I think we could quickly relearn the world, and just simply, okay, bring it slowly, divide up into groups, the Deep Thoughts University. We separate everything out, and we can only onboard things into our history books, into our science books, if we can take what we're reading, fully describe it in all dimensions, and then see it happen in an experiment in real life. Anyway, if you have your own opinions about this, please share them in the comments. Comments are just some of the best in the world, I have to say. You're not worried about telling me how great the product is. You're like, man, I had this experience. What about this? You guys have at least forged 20% of the episodes just out of comments on YouTube. So thank you very much. I'll give you a short bumper today. Everything you want is on deepthoughtsradio.com. Just remember there's a search field. So get in there and search around. There's tons of stuff, man. We must be up to about 650 episodes that are published at this point. To all the PayPal and Patreon folks, thank you so much. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over now.